Cyber Nation Uncensored.
And we're live. Hello, choombas. You got Cybersmily
Greetings, programs. Sorry.
No worries. You can introduce yourself now.
Greetings, program. This is Wisdom. I'm here again.
Right, so start the thing off. So for my site, I did push out some bug fixes and some enhancements into the combat tracker as well as the character generator for Cyberpunk 2020 on my site. I basically separated out in the combat tracker initiative versus selecting a opponent. So now you should be able to visually see whose initiative it currently is while you're clicking around choosing the different opponents there. And there were some other enhancements I did around skills on the character generator. Small quality of life changes, as it were. So you're able to now do some quick search of skills to help alleviate the looking through a full list of all the character or the Cyberpunk 2020 skills, because I know for me I was like, all right, there's a better way to do this, and that was to add in a little search bar for it. So that's about it for my site. I mean, there's a few other places that got enhanced, but too many to talk about.
I've been chipping away at the espionage article. I have one word for everybody. Ninjas.
Ninjas?
Yeah, I've been on a weird ninja kick, and that stuff is... I don't know if I'm going to do a separate source book for ninjas and whatnot, but yeah, I've been watching like all the old 80s movies with like Shokosugi and like reading like heavy ninja 80s comics like the Wolverine miniseries.
Nice.
Like the G.I. Joe silent interlude issue and whatnot. Just... It's a weird nostalgia kick. Yeah, some Daredevil with hand and all that grooviness. Yeah, that's the kick I've been on lately, and it's started to bleed into the espionage source book. So
cool. From a media standpoint with Cyberpunk, the only thing I thought was going to be a little bit cyberpunky was a movie on HBO Max, which was called Kimmy. So I kind of started watching that. And
I got mixed feelings about Kimmy.
Oh, you've seen it?
Oh yeah, it's good stuff. But man, it kind of stretches my suspension of disbelief at times.
Yeah, I mean, the first hour for me was like, okay, this is a movie about how bad agoraphobians have with dental hygiene.
Oh. You just had to remind me of the teeth, man. Why would you do that to me?
That was like the first half of the movie for me was like, where is this going? I see them setting it up, but they could get there a lot quicker in less time.
Been watching the Jack Reacher show.
Yeah, I saw that.
And everybody complained about the Tom Cruise movies because he doesn't look anything like Jack Reacher is described in the books. Like, man, this guy looks pretty much exactly like Jack Reacher is described in the books. Giant, blonde, and fucking tall and humongous. But man, was watching. I'm getting close to the end, and I was watching an episode last night where he is repeatedly hit by a dude full swinging a crowbar at him, including he gets hit in the face with it, and he's just okay. Like,
Yeah.
I was buying that he was a super badass and all that, but yeah, I'm not buying that a human being gets hit in the face with a crowbar and is just a-okay.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it. It's definitely, but you're right. You know, you have to. There's certain suspensions of disbelief that you have to have with.
Yeah, it was really weird because up until that point, the show had really been fairly grounded in reality. I mean, it obviously subscribes to the John Wayne school of thought, where the hero can never really, like, nothing really phases him to the nth degree. Like, the guy is a sociopath. He doesn't ever show emotion about anything. Which is, I guess, the macho bullshit ideal, I guess. I mean, it hasn't poked its head up much since the 90s, really. But yeah, it's an otherwise enjoyable show.
Yeah, well, with me, it was like, this guy's on the spectrum.
Yeah, he's definitely on the spectrum. Like, it's not all the circuits are connecting with that dude.
Right. Yeah,
but I mean, it's been highly theorized that like mountain men and stuff like that were like a lot of them were on the spectrum, because it takes that kind of personality to live alone and thrive.
Right.
So
I also caught
it works.
The first 3 episodes of an anime on Netflix called Levias. I don't know exactly.
I thought it was Levis, but yeah.
I got tuned
wrong.
into it because, you know, the cover art basically had a person with 2 cyber arms. So I'm like, okay, let's check this out. And they definitely have a blend of genres, as it were.
Yeah, anime started to do that a lot lately.
Turn of the century, like turn of 19th century. With, I don't know if it's steampunky or if it's, I don't know what they're going for with the cybernetics there. But they're driving like Model Ts and crazy crap like that. So yeah, and it's one of those animes that likes to have a lot of dramatic pauses. And
you know, I watched a steampunk anime recently on Netflix as well. Arcane, that League of Legends game. That anime is fucking next level. Like, it is on top. I'm not a fan of steampunk, and I'm not much of a fan of fantasy these days. But Arcane is amazing. I highly recommend it. Or Arcanum? I don't know. Something. I don't have Netflix open in front of me, but it's good stuff.
yeah, so other news in the Cyberpunk world, Cyberpunk 2077 just pushed out a humongous update to the game.
Oh, it's so big. And it's don't be fooled. It's humongous, and there's a lot of great stuff in it. It's not a content DLC, although there is new content in it. It's mostly quality of life, but then they add these little things that make the game so much better. You can buy apartments now. Apparently the the love interests, they've been expanded. Oh, it's good. I very much am enjoying what I've seen so far.
Yeah, the other thing is they put in those weird mechanics of like, okay, in the original game, you had a shower and you could sleep, but why would you do either, right?
Yeah.
So basically, you turn into a character who's up 24/7, stinking to God knows how bad. So now, if you shower, you get bonuses. If you sleep, you get bonuses. If you drink coffee or tea, you get bonuses. So that kind of was interesting, and it looked like there was a lot of stuff that mods tried to fix and implement. Right, so better vehicle control. We'll see how that works. Better AIs, which
What? I'm rocking the PS5, and the graphics difference now is it's awe-inspiring. It's stunning.
yeah, I've seen a little bit on the PC.
I mean, I don't know what the graphics actually look like on PC, but I'd say they have to be about equal now, because the PlayStation is definitely running at 4K, and it's gorgeous. Everything loads correctly and on time. You've got two choices. You can go for the full ray tracing that gives you like the photorealistic, like, oh my god, these graphics are amazing. Or you can tone it down to performance mode where, you're not overloading your system.
Yep.
Honestly, I can't tell the difference between the two. My eyesight's fucked though, so.
Yeah, and some other little tweaks that I haven't encountered yet, and granted I've only played a little bit, is that, and it's kind of more realistic to the cyberpunk world, is if you start like firing in a crowd, the crowd will actually start firing back, some of them. If you try to hijack a car, you might suddenly start dealing with the NPC in combat. Supposedly there's some drive-by shootings that can happen as well,
Wow.
but
I have not
seen that yet.
encountered that yet, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. And kind of like the other things, the biggest thing that I think a lot of people are wanting was the ability to change your looks after the fact.
Yeah, that's a groovy new addition. Any mirror you come across, you can change your looks.
Yep. So it seems like they tackled a lot of what the modding community was doing, but I think they still have, with the mods, there's still so many mods out there right now, and of course the worst thing is console players don't get to enjoy that.
Don't get me wrong, the game still has a lot of room for improvement. It still doesn't feature all the things that they were kind of advertising it would until like late in the day when they're like, well, we can't do that, so we're just going to pretend we never said anything.
Yeah.
But it's still a fantastic game. People hate on it. Most of the people who hate on it have never played it or haven't played it since like the first week. Most of the bugs, like anything that was game breaking, really has been long fixed, and now it's just every time they update it, it gets better and better. It's still, I mean, it's the joy of running around Night City. I don't really care about anything else. I get to run around Night City. I get to see it firsthand. It's the world that I have spent the last 40 years or 30 years now running games in, thinking about constantly, writing about, building worlds, and now I get to play in it. I get to see it. and it just gets better and better.
Testify,
So
my friend.
I got no hate at all for this game.
Yeah, I don't have any hate, and granted, I haven't been a big computer gamer, so I don't know how other games are and what they were like, and like recently I just bought Witcher 3 to understand where the evolution of Cyberpunk came from, and I don't think it was
Sure.
an improvement over Witcher 3, but I definitely think Cyberpunk is on its way to get to that quality with, or even actually better.
Well, I
So,
mean, I've played a lot of console games,
yeah,
and I've never played anything that was visually as gorgeous as Cyberpunk.
yeah,
Any other complaints aside, I've never played anything that looked as beautiful. That the graphics were so just over the top as this.
yeah. And like I said in our four-part review, it definitely brought storytelling to a whole nother level.
Yeah.
However, we're not here to discuss Cyberpunk 2077. We're actually here to discuss one book that I think both of us agree on is one of the major must-haves in your arsenal for
Top
Cyberpunk
5, baby.
2020. Even Red, I think you can port a lot of this stuff from this book.
I
into
mean,
Red.
really, you could use it for any game where you have a guy who makes his living by dealing with other people.
Yep. So, as you can see on the screen, but I'm going to tell you now, if you're actually listening and not watching, we're talking about Wildside, the source book for fixers. This was
Yeah,
written by Benjamin Wright and Mike Router. I want to say Router.
that's how I
I'm
would pronounce
butchering the
it,
name.
but it might be Rotor. I don't
Yeah.
know.
So these guys really brought splat books, or what a splat book could be, to the front table, and I wish there was a lot more splat books like this one, because it gave a lot of juicy rules and expansions and background that you could use, that really applies to running a cyberpunk game, which I think a lot of some of the other books out there are more passive type of history and how things are, at least at the macro level, whereas the GM really wants to get into the nitty gritty.
I mean, of all the like role specific books, Protect and Serve, Solo of Fortune, Rocker Boy. This Wildside is the one that does it the best, as far as I'm concerned. It gets deep into the mindset of the fixer. It removes that. You know how I feel about abstract bullshit when it comes to like describing what a character is supposed to be able to do.
Yep.
It removes that. It gives codified rules for how to deal with a fixer's contacts, how to, break down each of those contacts into an actual person. And it does it in a really genius way as far as I'm concerned.
Yep. So let's start breaking into this. So the first part of the book is an introduction into what a fixer is, and it kind of gives you a trying to think of the flavor from the point of view of someone that lives in this world of what a fixer is. At least the concept of what a player fixer would be.
Yeah.
So it's definitely great background to read. And then you get into chapter 1, which basically breaks down street deal. Um, and what street deal means versus streetwise.
Yeah,
Is the
trying
first part
to
of this
explain the
chapter.
difference to that with players in the 2020 age was
Yep.
it got frustrating.
So chapter 1 is actually the bulk of, I think, this book. So it starts getting into street
Yeah,
deal, and what it does with street deal is it kind of breaks it down into three different systems, right? Which was the down and dirty, which is basically a quick, easy system to use to get fixer specialties a little bit of a bonus. So I might be a fixer who's into black market weaponry. So anything that pertains to that particular subject, I get a specific bonus, which is half the skill, right? To a roll.
yeah,
Just to kind of show you and I think they're getting into, you're going to have a background where you have contacts within or know people where you can get whatever you're looking for as a fixer. And then the next is hot stuff, which is just a more advanced. So you still have kind of contacts, but you basically buy points to be able to make multiple skill rolls, right? So if you fail on one skill roll, you have the ability to re-roll it based on whatever subject matter it is. And there's a point value system. It's a little complicated, but you basically are able to purchase 1 to 6 rolls that you can use to specific specialties, and you would mark those on your sheet, right? And then you have the big league, which actually is a point system based off of your street deal, in which you purchase contacts, right? So the contact could be anything, like chief of the police, head of security of the mall, whatever you can imagine, you can make as a contact. And then each contact has a capability which determines how well that contact will actually succeed in whatever task you provide it. Then you have the reputation, um, you know, how exposed that particular contact is, the availability, which I kind of liked as a contact thing, because I know with my players they always reach out to friends and other contacts from the life path. But it's nice to see like some rules around how often or how available a character is based off your luck, which again, to me, I love this system because it makes luck important for a fixer, which turns that stat into a non-dot dump stat. So you have a better rounded character. And then the reliability of that contact, which I also liked, right? Whether he's going to rat you out or get you backstabbed versus he's always there and ready to assist
I
you.
like that. In unlike say Netrunner, where a Netrunner is the only person who can hack, blah blah blah, with rules as written, with Wildside, the fixer gets like a tremendously huge list of contacts, but regular other characters who have street deal and have luck can have their own list of characters. They can have their own list of contacts that they can call on, and like you said, it's just done so well. It adds so much to the game to be able to like have a list of people that you can rely on to some extent or another, at least rely on as much as anybody can rely on anybody in Cyberpunk.
Yeah, and for me, the contact system in Wildside, like you said, can be applied to almost every other character class, right? Because in
Yeah.
life, you know people, whether they're your friends or not, doesn't matter. But you know people for the right price. They'll do what you want done. And if you're an edge runner, you're gonna have no people that do bad things as well. So having the contact system, which is the hot stuff, big league, really could be applied to most of the other characters classes. So again, great rules, a little mathy. So if your players don't like math and don't like a little bit of bookkeeping, then the system is not going to work for you. So you want to go with the down and
Well,
dirty, a nice system to just give you a bonus on specialties.
yeah. I mean, it's math heavy, but it's only math heavy once when you generate the list. After that, you just have contacts, and it'll tell you'll know how trustworthy that contact is and how well they can do whatever service they perform that you have them as a contact for in the first place. So it's like anything else with character generation. Once you've done it, you don't really have to worry about it again.
Yep, until you go up a skill level.
Yeah, well, yeah.
But that's true for other systems like D&D. There was a bunch of bookkeeping every time you went up a level.
Yeah, I mean that's the downside to character advancement in any system that I've ever played is, hey, well, you got to go write some shit down and do a little bit of basic math.
Yep.
Unless you're playing something like Cinnabar, in that case, you got to break out the calculus tables and the abacus and like, what the hell am I doing?
Yep. So the contact system, to me, I think is one of the biggest ones that I know my players like in using when they are doing fixers. Moving along, it again, the one thing I gotta say was, even though this is a great book, it's not well organized.
No, sadly, it's not. And like I don't know what font they used, but it kind of hurts to read. That's the other major downside is the fonts they use are not conducive to comfort.
Right. So in
And
between the contact system and then the specialized fixers, which is basically sub roles of the fixer, there is some interesting or pretty good stuff in between there. So it kind of goes into which system you should use for your contacts, and then it talks about what's important to a fixer, right? Information, resources, and then it gets into a discussion of streetwise versus a street deal. Gets into the concept of Geary, which I know third edition was their economy system was all about.
yeah,
However, understanding what Geary is and that it's the economy of the fixer is not just cash. It's
yeah,
also
it's
goods,
favors.
services, and favors. Yeah. So this section, this little, I guess, blurb in between, kind of two great sections, is just getting into all of that kind of economics and other things that really, as a GM, you should be thinking about when it comes to fixers. The other thing that they kind of squirrel into that section on page 17 is when you're doing any type of deal making or bartering, you know, what is the advantage versus streetwise versus street deal when you're negotiating a price, right? So page 17, I'm not going to get fully into the rules because I want to give credit to
There's a lot
Sorry,
there.
and there's a lot there, right? So it gives you how much you can expect to make in the deal if you have a successful roll, right? So the more success you have, it's always advantage to the person who succeeds, and it gives you kind of those rules on how to do it. They re-mention these rules later in the book as well, but
Yeah, in
that's
better
the first
detail
section.
too.
And that's kind of the one thing that another thing that I thought really this book and organization should have done is to take all those actual game rules and make an appendix in the book.
Yeah, that's that would have been ideal. But I mean, the RTG books have always been bad about like not having appendixes, not having
Glossary.
the word escapes me. Glossary. Thank you. Jesus, I was
And
I was
index
having a
as
stroke
well.
there.
Well, indexes they have in Chrome, but not for things like the Splat books.
Yeah, like the things where they've got these little bitty rules mentioned, like in the middle of a blurb of text, they'll just talk about this little bitty rule, and trying to find that in the middle of a game is just headache inducing. It's I'm gonna promote Interlock Unlimited, but that's one of the things I was most pleased with about Interlock Unlimited is I was able to take all these little rules and put them all in one place in a coherent mess.
Yep. Yeah, there was another PDF that's out there. Is it called the Data Book?
Are you talking about the reference book by Andrew James?
Yes. Like
Man, that was the very
all the rules and
first.
just puts them all into a PDF.
I had a way back in like 95. I had a friend who maybe 96, I don't know, but it was the very first before I even had internet, before I'd ever like looked at the internet. A friend of mine had it. He printed that off for me and handed it to me. Basically, I think at the time it was just the cyberware list, but yeah, Andrew James his work was one of the major influences of Data Fortress, and one of the major reasons I wrote Interlock Unlimited. Like it let me know to find where to find all these obscure rules.
Yeah.
I love that book so much. I illustrated it. Turned it into Ultra Chrome. Now I just illustrated the gear, not the rules, but yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I still got to get that site going for you that we talked about with all the search capabilities. We'll talk about that offline. So that might be an improvement for Data Fortress. Brought to you by...
Make it searchable?
Yeah, so this was years ago when I first got into web development. I was like, hey, I would love to collab with you. And I don't know why we just stopped that whole collab, but...
it's not that I didn't want to continue with it. It's that my health problems got to a point where I didn't touch a computer for like a year.
Right.
And they still present major problems with me getting online. It's hard to find comfort. The robbery just now, that is not going to help things.
Right.
Or maybe it will. Maybe it'll like motivate me to get off my ass. But yeah, no, I still want to collaborate on all that stuff.
Yep. I still have the
web design is obviously not my strong point.
I still got a lot of that stuff still saved on my machine, so yeah. Well,
hell, I've got a lot of the stuff that you sent me, the prototype stuff. I've got that on my machine.
Yeah. Well, again, offline we'll
offline.
Take it, so
sorry,
audience, you get to hear the inner workings of two old men talking about.
Yeah, if you've been listening this far, you know we're just gonna rant and go off topic. Just learn to love it.
So the next
But anyway,
section, it gets into
yeah.
the specialized fixers, which are broken down into various categories. You have salesmen, moneybags, leeches, go-betweens, mobsters, and then it gets into the secondary roles. So here you get the meat of the various types of fixers. And I think the only other Splat book that kind of did this was Live and Direct, right? Where it took a lot of different roles or sub roles of that particular character class and split them off. I think
Yeah.
Wildside is probably the only one that did it. Did a very thorough job of it.
I mean, Primitive Screwheads, they tried to include a lot of the weird sub roles and stuff like that, but it wasn't. They didn't do it in as much as I love that book. And hell, 2 episodes ago, that's all we talked about. It didn't do that. It didn't do the expanded roles in a very coherent method, mostly because the expanded roles prior to Wildside weren't very coherent themselves. Wildside makes a compelling argument for all of these extra roles.
Yep. Yeah, so they're pretty much all based off of the fixer role, and then you have what's called the extended family, which actually has new roles that you can play. One popular one I've seen is the Prowler, right? So it's kind of an anti-solo.
Well, before this book was written, everybody confused fixers with thieves. Like, it was this weird thing that I'd have to argue with people about constantly. Like, fixers are not thieves. And finally this book came out and said, fixers are not thieves. They hire other people to do that shit for them. And they added Prowler because Prowlers are thieves.
Yep. So
I won that argument.
Introduce some new special abilities with each of the classes, so you definitely want to check those out. You also have Con Man, right? So if you ever want to be a con man, now you have a role. Scavenger, which is basically kind of a specific type of, not really a
it's like Prowler in that it's things that people threw under the fixer heading because they didn't know where else to put it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not really a fixer. It's what it says it is. It's a salvage artist.
Yeah. And it's not like the scavs in 2077. They just grab any type of garbage, any type of thrown away
people
material.
And shit like that.
Yeah, they're not the scavs. I fucking hate those things. You could be, right? So there is a subculture of that, but scavengers, I think, are just, they'll take whatever, right?
Right.
I'm sure there's probably sub roles within that one role. The other debut is the Street Punk, which was also in Solo of Fortune, kind of.
Yeah, let's play a gang member.
Yeah.
Or, just your average thug, which was something that was sorely missing. Like, there wasn't anything to cover that, really, originally, because you only had the choice between the 9 roles, and they're not really solos, they're not really fixers, they're kind of this weird mix of the two. Some people tried to list them as nomads, but I'm like, well, they're not going anywhere.
Yep.
The family special ability works for them, which is why that's kind of what they get, but yeah.
Yeah. And then you have Dancer Prostitute, which I think in the main book they tried to get into, and they kind of fleshed it out a little more, specifically I think with the vamp skill. And again, I still don't understand what vamp.
Well, it's to differentiate them between Rocker Boy, which is what everybody was trying to make prostitutes out to be in before Wildside. As well, they're just a subset of Rocker Boy. I'm like, no, they're really not. Yeah, they perform, but it's not for the same reasons. Like, they're not trying to inspire anyone to do anything other than give them money.
Yep.
And have a good time. I mean, if it's a good prostitute or a good dancer or a good stage performer or whatever, they're there to please the audience.
Yeah. So I don't know if you've played a lot as a character, but what sub role do you think you like the most?
Sub role, Prowler. I love the Prowler sub role. I've always been a fan of like heist movies and stuff like that, and so Prowler let me do that. I didn't ever really get to play one until Interlock Unlimited, but I ran them quite a bit.
Right. Yeah, the fixer character I had was a sniffer, just because I wanted that generic ability to get whatever, right? I'm just the guy who finds things. And I've had players play mostly Black Marketeers. In the
There was
various roles for that.
In the early days, my second character was he was at the time he was a straight fixer because Wildside hadn't come out, but he was an arms dealer. He sold on the black market, and that was his specialty. And then he had a secondary specialty of as like a talent broker. Yeah. So I mean, second character ever played in Cyberpunk. My love for fixers is deep.
Yeah. This moves us on to chapter 3, or sorry, chapter 2, name of the game, which kind of breaks down into, again, a little more emphasis on what a fixer is, why they do what they do, some key points that every fixer should know. And the other section, which I think really gets into the game mechanics, is forming a business, right? And how. So it breaks down how a fixer makes his money. How many hours he needs to dedicate, etc. So as a fixer grows in level, he really should start getting subordinates. So they say at like level 7, level 6, you really, as a fixer, you should start not being, a single island, because like a level 10
fixer, at that point you've got power, you've got influence. You're not going to be running the streets doing shit. If you show up, it usually means something's wrong, or you've got an offer that can't be refused. And it's not required to use these rules, but for players who want like actual like rules for these situations, I mean, I love this shit. Being able to, sit down and figure out, okay, well, I'm this level of fixer. If I'm starting a character out at this level, I should have this much influence. I should have these many people under my belt running the streets for me. And then, of course, you can supplement that with, whatever contacts you personally make and hire in the course of play. But it gives you a basis to start out with. It isn't just the GM hand waving some bullshit. Yeah, that's about the best thing I can say about that.
Yeah, and also in this section, when it gets into the business, it really drives home what a level 10 character is, or even what a level 9 in your special ability character is. again, you had that problem when there wasn't any rules really restricting how high, the starting character could do. So, of course, you know, naive GMs back in the day, and I wouldn't say they're always naive players, but players who didn't know the rules are like, yeah, of course I'm going to do a 10 special ability because it gives me the max money.
Yeah, gives me the max bonus to my rolls and all that.
However, I think
Nah.
in various supplements and even in the main book, it didn't hit home exactly what a 10 is. Yeah, you had a one sentence statement, but when you look at these rules, you can see, oh crap, this I have to work, was it 10 plus 2 squared, I think is it. So you have to work 144 hours a week
Yeah.
to be a level
Some of the
10
math
fixer.
gets a little more painful than the rest.
Right. So
Um,
it kind of stresses, like, if you want to be able to make money at that level, the salary that you're getting, which is like, I don't know, 10,000 EB a month, that you have to put in 144 hours a week. And granted, the system in here breaks it down into how you hire subordinates to kind of take on some of the work. You give them a kickback, and eventually you even out with your with the money and how to make money. But it's definitely a great system for building a business, really, in Cyberpunk. Because you
yeah.
can even take these rules and apply them to techie, right? So,
Yeah,
as
or
a,
any character. I mean, any character who's gonna like go into business for himself, these rules will work for.
yep. So yeah, you can just replace Street Deal and well, solo. Yeah, if you start having a business of, like, bodyguard or paid
Yeah,
assassin or paid muscle, yeah, you would have your subordinates and
I mean, if you're gonna play the A team, you're gonna have somebody making the
yep.
calls for you.
Keep in mind
Hell,
that
Hannibal wasn't a solo.
yeah,
Hannibal was a fixer.
yeah. If you do use these rules and the player wants to start owning their own business, leadership is key in this system, because the other thing that, fine, you build your little empire, but there is always the possibility of treachery. So you want to also have some leadership points and skills if you plan on doing that. So if your
Yeah,
players are building their little empire and have no leadership, yeah, there's going to be some interesting interesting side quests that the referee should be creating for them.
things definitely will happen.
Yeah. And then this chapter wraps up with interactions between other roles, and why a fixer would interact with these roles. So, and oops, that wasn't the last part. The last part was getting into or making a fixer campaign and how you would do that. So there's 2 pages of goodness there for any GM.
Yeah, important pages too. I mean, a fixer is one of those characters that if he can play you can have a background fixer, and that works. But they work best when they're kind of like the driving force, because they're the ones who are making the deals. They're the ones who really are the ones who are able to push to the next stage of whatever's happening.
Yeah, so again, all goodness here. It For me, it is definitely one of the, well, it's the second book we're reviewing, so
Yeah.
it's definitely one of the greater books here. Chapter 3 goes into tools of the trade. So this actually breaks it down into a bunch of different things. Mostly it's centered around the cache and what Cyberpunk 2020 cache is, but it first starts off with how to influence people and make people do what you want. So basically, it breaks or expands the rules for empathy and cool skills and how to work with them. So the concept is that all these empathy skills that you're doing, interrogation, intimidation, seduction. I would even go so far as social and interview, authority, charismatic leadership. What's the difficulty set, right? So these rules make it very simplistic in that you're just taking your cool stat, times it by two and a half of the person you're trying to do or be influential on, and it's a straight up, well, it's not necessarily a straight up roll. There's a table with a bunch of modifiers, which you should
Yeah,
use.
but it gives you those modifiers that you need, as opposed to abstracting them.
Yeah, and I think the basic book really didn't get into all of that interpersonal skills, right? They have them, they're great to have, but what are the rules behind it? It's yes, it's an arbitrary number that a GM can make up on the fly, but a player will also argue, well, what do you mean it's, very difficult for this guy? And as a GM, you have to explain why it is versus, well, this character has this cool, so this is your difficulty. Beat
Yeah,
it. Because I know some, and that's not all groups, right? There are some groups that will always debate with a GM on
always.
why the numbers are the numbers, because those players are usually rule lawyers and they've read the rules and know the rules, and the expectation is you're going to follow those rules as a GM. Yeah, not always. Um, Nothing can piss off a rules lawyer than going off script.
They hate that shit. Um, but yeah, that's the purview of the GM. You don't like it? Find a different table.
Yep. Um, then again, it goes back into the bargaining rules again. So it rehashes those and the percentage differences on how you can earn or how things cost and how much you can get for things when bartering with fixers. Which then leads into the whole cash economy, credits, what are or cred chips, i.e., chop, um, and basically gives a lot of fluff um, to the whole economics of the world. So,
Yeah, it really breaks them down like into all the different types of transactions that you can make, all the currencies, exchange rates. Like it's useful stuff.
yeah,
And especially if you have characters who like move from one country to another a lot, um, is very helpful there too.
yeah. I mean, this section around the money and cred chips and etc. Uh, is lengthy for such a minor well, it's not really a minor thing, but in gameplay it often goes to the side of, okay, I just have cash, right? But it gets into pretty heavy understanding of how money works in Cyberpunk,
Yeah,
which is always good to have when to have that kind of background, and also improves the immersion, right? of.
Well, I mean, it's like we've talked about several times now. Like people who come to this game from other systems, other games, it's sometimes hard to grasp. And money, and how you get paid and all that. That's one of those things that it's different in Cyberpunk.
Yep.
It's a much more realistic and honestly dirt fucking poor themed game.
Yep.
There's not a lot of hoarding to be done, at least at low level.
Yep. And then after economy, it goes into sin. And what sin is the state identification number, i.e., your identity.
Yeah, basically your driver's license, your social security card, your birth certificate, all that rolled into one.
Your gun license, your right to
any
own
license
property.
the state issues, it gets added to your sin. You get medical weed, there you go. Although I would assume marijuana would. That's a whole nother story right there. We're gonna avoid that one right now.
And the other thing around a sin versus a sinless person. So these rules get into what that really means. So are you a zero or are you sinned?
And it breaks down the benefits and cons for both.
Yep. It also has the costs around getting a false identity, getting a whole different secret identity, how to zero yourself out, which basically means getting rid of your sin and all the information and data associated with you.
Killing your paper trail.
Yeah. And the other thing I liked in here was it also had equipment, right? So it gave you the identity equipment, whether it's fake fingerprints, nanite fingerprints, same with eyes, how to change your DNA. So again, if you are a malevolent referee who tries to, okay, these guys attacked this facility, well, what DNA did they leave behind? What fingerprints did they leave behind? What was on the camera, etc. This is a great resource to kind of push your players into buying additional equipment that they might not have thought of if they want to avoid detection.
Yeah.
Because a lot of players...
It's a great way to get them to spend money when they do start hoarding it.
Yeah.
A good fake ID, that is not cheap. Getting rid of, all vestiges of your past, all your electronic trail, that's not cheap. And it shouldn't be. Like, these things are expensive in real life. Sure, you can get a cheap fake ID from, Stewie down the block, if you don't mind, having a picture of like a 50-year-old Guatemalan dude for your, 20-year-old Chinese guy. Like, I mean, sure, you can make it work. It'll get you into a bar maybe, but that's about it.
Yeah, also in this section, you'll actually see a side note around bolt holes and safe houses, which I think a lot of players just don't think about.
They really don't.
And and that's the one thing that I try to, like, as a player, as a Cyberpunk player, I always think about things like that. Do I need a safe house? Do I want a safe house? What do I want, do I want to make sure that I'm sinless or have an alternate identity?
This is, like, it's weird, but with Cyberpunk, really with any role-playing game, but particularly with Cyberpunk, the more bookkeeping you do for your character, I think the better your play experience is going to be.
Right.
If you have a list of places around the city where you've got just little hidey holes, maybe just some gear stashed, place to sleep if you need to, a place to go when you're on the run. These things can do nothing but help your character, and so many people don't take advantage of that. Hell, the Nomad I played, I had a list of like secret stashes where he kept vehicle, uh, clothing, weapons, food. Like I had like a list of those in almost every state. Um, in the southwestern states, there were like 3 or 4 stashes to each of them, like because that's where he traveled the most. But yeah, the bookkeeping is only going to help your character. It's only going to help you like more fully realize and idealize your character.
Yep. Yeah, and especially with like, and again, depends on the campaign you do. If you're playing in like an edgerunner who's doing extractions, assassinations, and various crimes, Johnny Law should always be one step behind them. And not only that, but the corporations that they attack. So to avoid any type of detection or retribution from those corps or Johnny Law, as a character, you should always think about that. And I think it's one problem with a lot of role-playing games is you generate these murder hobos who don't get any consequences. And I think that's what separates Cyberpunk a little more than the others is there should be consequences, and there's a lot more evil in the world, as it were.
Yeah.
And not only that, but just because you're a 20th level wizard doesn't isn't going to stop a bullet from possibly killing you from a level 1.
Yeah, that's the ultimate beauty of the interlock rules system is I don't care how tough of a dude you are, you could be, you know, Genghis Khan on steroids, but a 12-year-old with a zip gun can still take you out with one shot. That's the beauty of Cyberpunk. It creates drama that very few other role-playing games even attempt to try.
Yep. So that kind of ends chapter 3. So it's all about economy and sins and identities. A lot of good stuff in there. Definitely a must check out and recommend to players. And right before chapter 4, I'm just looking at the book on page 66. I think the artist who drew that cityscape probably was living in, I want to say, freaking Seattle.
I mean, it's definitely a West Coast city right there.
Yeah.
I mean, dude's wearing shorts. It's not New York.
Most definitely not.
Might be Vegas. I don't
Eh,
know. Either way, it's one of the better images in the book, and
true.
uh, the only problem with it really is like all the images in the book, and all the sidebars. It's really dark.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't know if that's the original art or whatever filter was put on it for printing, but again, it's not the easiest thing to look at. It's not the easiest thing on the eyes as a comfort level. Like the art is gorgeous, um, it's just very dark,
Yep. So
as in color wise, not as in subject matter. Subject matter, it's just fun.
yeah, there's other darker images.
Yeah, it's actually one of the tamer books as far as art subject matter goes.
Yep. So chapter 4 is the street. It kind of goes into what a strip is in a city, like how active and what you can expect on one city street within any city that you're going to have
I
a
mean,
lot of.
it's where the kids go to cruise.
Yep. So
And
like
it's where the deals get made.
New York, it would be like Times Square. Um, but
When I was living in Missouri, when I was in Kansas City proper, there were two. There was Troost and Paseo. Those were the crime strips. But then out in the suburbs, in Independence, there was Nolan Road, and Nolan Road is where everybody went to cruise and drive their nice cars and like, try and pick up chicks. Like I spent many Friday night on Nolan Road.
yep. And it kind of breaks it down into what a strip is, what you can find there, all the various, like Derek says, people are just there, so that means there's going to be vendors of all sorts. You're going to find
Yeah,
side alleys to various events. And it just talks about what the strip is and what you can expect there. And then it also provides in some of the laws, which kind of gives you some leanings into what you can find on the strip, like blood sport, pit fighting.
yeah. I mean, the strip is always going to be the city's hub. It's not going to necessarily be the black market, but it will be the city's hub for the counterculture. Like, because everybody goes there. Everybody from all the different cliques and all the different um, backgrounds, they all meet here, and it's a shared neutral ground. And in almost every city, that neutral ground is respected. When something breaks off on the strip, it's a big deal. It gets everybody's attention.
Yeah, and the next few paragraphs are basically just getting into city life, what the strip is, what a city should be, how you should portray a city. The various sidebars have like news items, television shows, advertisements.
Beautiful, beautiful flavor text.
Yep. Um, so yeah, I tried to get into the background of a city world, and again, each section has little tidbits you want to bring in. One particular section is called Life on the Farm, which goes into drugs and drug dealing. A few new drugs are presented, but it also gives you the a purity table for drugs, and how drug deals basically would work for a fixer and any character.
It becomes readily apparent that um, while Mike Pondsmith had the final say with what was published, he did not write this section. Mike Pondsmith's anti-drug views were pretty ham-fisted with 2020, and this tries to even and smooth that out a little bit and bring a little bit of, like, I'm not going to say reality back to it because the prices are still ridiculous, but it does try to alleviate some of that heavy-handedness.
Yep. And
If that makes any sense whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, so I think, who is it? Ocelots? Was it Ocelot who came up with a better rule
Ocelot's
system?
drug rules
Yeah.
on mockeries.
Yeah, that I always turn to because to me it was a little more realistic in costs, as well as effects.
Yep. Ocelot's drug rules, which I mean, it was the basis for the Interlock Unlimited drug rules. It's really the basis for anybody's who wants to have a more realistic, more grounded drug experience, good or bad, in their game. It's creating drugs, actually dealing with drugs and addiction. Like it's one of the better, more revered articles in among cyberpunk webmasters.
Yep.
It in fact is probably Ocelot's. Like there was a lot of fantastic work on Mockery's site, but the drug rules I think were probably number one.
Yep. And again, the rest of this chapter is getting into other technologies in the world. It also goes and finally wraps up with what is a fixer. How does a fixer move from country to country because of the multi nature, right? And when you're shifting your skills, he presents, or the authors give how those skills would change from for difficulty, right? So if you're in England as an American, you're in England or Australia, etc., you kind of know the culture. But if you go to
Yeah.
Japan or Zulu, as what's put in this chart, it's completely alien. So the difficulty is going to be increased when you're trying to do things. Now, as a movie
and
shaker,
it throws in rules for culture shock, and that stuff is important.
So if you are running a game that's multinational, i.e., going to many of the different places of the world, which I've had campaigns like that, high profile,
Oh yeah,
special ops teams who travel the world and do what they need to do. So I've had to use these rules, and they are good to give that flavor and that challenge to your players. And that section kind of wraps up that chapter of chapter 4. And finally, we're into chapter 5, which is the appendices. Again, giving more background stuff and flavor to your campaign. The biggest section is around the various religions that are within the United States in 2020, as well as political parties in the 2020s, which is not just the two we normally have in the United States, but actually broken up into multiple ones. Some with greater influence than others.
It takes a much broader look than just the surface, but it's kind of weird to me that this stuff was covered in this book and not Home of the Free.
Yeah. Was this
it feels like this was like leftover material from Home of the Free.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely does. But the other thing is, so after the religions, it gives you, and a few of the various cyberpunk books have this, which was basically an inspiration reference materials, where the authors present movies, media, TV shows, novels, and comics that you should go off and read. Now, granted, the material is 20 plus years old, but some of these, some of the inspiration definitely are classics, which even if you watch it today, you definitely wouldn't get bored or too confused over why the people are acting the way they are. Because I know some older movies do not age well. But I think most of these would.
But I mean, a classic's always going to be a classic. Some of the movies, some of the stuff they pick as inspirations, like they list why they picked it. but it's still kind of a weird choice. I mean, like they list Deep Space Nine for the just because of the character Quark, or they list Wall Street for factors when Wall Street is much more a corporate movie, I think.
Yeah.
Um, but others, I mean, are just obvious choices. Casablanca, Goodfellas, uh, the Godfather series. I mean, you can't watch. You can't. It's almost impossible to hear the word fixer and not think of Tony Montana from Scarface.
Yep. Well, I like it that they listed the sneakers, which to me, I always, even before this book came out, when I saw this, I was like, that is such a cyberpunk campaign.
Dude, Sneakers is one of the most underrated cyberpunk movies ever made. That movie, from start to finish, is pure win, and I really think it's got some of the finest performances by its actors. Sidney Poitier in that movie is hilarious. It's also a very, very early appearance of oh Christ, John Malkovich. Sorry, brain fart.
Yep. Also, in this section, there's a list of new slang that you use at the table. I think the biggest one that I constantly use is gato.
Yeah.
But there's other good ones like gaijin, using that. Giri, gomi, I use a lot.
Most of the foreign words are pretty good stuff.
Yeah.
Uh, there's a lot of silly words like gonk. I mean, that's just regular slang to me. Um, I like brain potato. I like that. I've always liked that.
Yeah.
2020 hindsight's a little too meta for me. Um, and then it moves back into the silly, like kleptoid, metalhead. And,
Well, another
uh,
good one is
is
vidiot.
yeah, Vidiot's good. Okay, my favorite bit of slang in here is Rimbo, which is supposed to be a cross between Rambo and Bimbo. And for some reason, when I first read that, I read that at the same time that I smoked weed for the very first time, and I started laughing so hard that like I couldn't get words out of my mouth to explain to my friends why I was laughing. Looking back, that's kind of stupid and cringeworthy, but at the time, I thought that was the funniest combination I'd ever heard.
Yeah. And to wrap up the book, it basically has some flavor charts to help improve the immersion of your game. Um,
I love the atmosphere tables. I've used them many times. They they suggest things that you might not have thought about, and that can happen a lot when you're running a game and trying to describe a scene. You sometimes, you don't think about the little things. You don't think about things like, random noise coming from an apartment, somebody's left their TV on, or you know condoms on the ground, and just various trash. Uh, yeah, things that like you might picture in your head, but your players aren't getting until you start describing it better. And it just helps you remember some of those elements.
yep. Yeah, there's actually a great generic resource on Drive Through RPG I bought it. I just don't remember what it was called. Crap. Basically, it's a book full of these types of charts, like how a building appears, what's the architecture of the building, what the building's used for. Goes into various characters. How do you describe a character? What they look like, and it's all just charts. There's no like rules or anything. It's just full of whatever chart you might need. Augmented realities. It's pay what you want, the book is just packed full of cyberpunk random charts. Any chart you can think of,
I will.
that supplement has it. And I know this is a review of the wild side, but just because
I mean,
the
heck,
charts
if it's a
here.
good product, I'm all about promoting people's good works.
Yeah.
So yeah, that sounds awesome. I need to pick that up. So it's called Augmented Reality.
Yeah, and drive through RPG. And again, it's pay what you want.
All right.
So,
Yeah.
if you're a fan of an artist or author, you should always send them money, no matter what, because they might do it for free for themselves, but giving them money really shows you how much you appreciate their work, especially in this day and age.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As someone who has given all my stuff away free, yeah, help people out when you can.
Yep.
Show them your appreciation.
So that kind of wraps up Wild Side. Like I said, to me, this book, every section I've used in various games and any campaigns I use, it is one of those ones that I think as a player, you definitely, it's one of the books you should have in your library next to the main book.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's top 5 for sure. And as far as the character specific, it's number 1.
Yep.
You cannot go wrong by having this in your library. Even if you don't play Cyberpunk, there are rules in here that will help you with any game you do run. Even system of verse games. Like there's stuff in here that'll help you if you play Dungeons and Dragons, or anything really.
Yeah, and for me, Benjamin Wright and Mike Roeder, I think, really, really did a fantastic job
Yeah.
improving Cyberpunk in general with this, as well as other material that they've produced.
I don't know Mike, but I've been friends with Benjamin for several years now, and the dude's awesome. He's a great guy. He for a long time he was one of the backbones of RTG. I'm not really sure of his involvement with him now, but I know that like his work has always been solid, and this is probably my favorite example of it.
Yep. Yeah, so you heard it from us. Buy this book. It's a must-have.
Buy the book.
You can get it.
If you can, don't buy the first edition. If you're buying like a hard copy, the binding of the book wasn't all that great. I know I went through. My first copy like fell apart on me. Just 90s publishing.
Yes. The two books that.
The second printing was much better.
Yeah, for me.
And I believe that DriveThruRPG has a copy, and they'll just print on demand. And I'm sure that copy is will you'll get to choose how that's printed out.
Yeah, and with DriveThruRPG, you can get a hard copy from them, but you can also get a hard copy from our Talsorian as well.
Yep.
or demand it of your local game store, right? To granted, they might not want to because they're like, "Why do you want to buy a book from 30 years ago?"
Well, I mean, because it's better than anything being written today. That's why.
Exactly.
Cyberpunk 2020, baby.
But yeah, I still have my Wild Side still intact. Binding is not too bad. There was one page that wasn't set right, so it's kind of like this frayed half an inch of paper at the bottom of my book that I probably should have cut out all years ago. But I still have it as one unit. However, my Listen Up Primitive Head, that thing fell apart, as well as my pack rim.
My Wild Side, the problem with was the glue and the binding. That just like kind of disintegrated on me. Now that's probably because I left it in the hot car. But I'll tell you what book stood the test of time better than anything else, and that was Chrome 1. Holy crap, is that the most abused book in my library? And it still holds up. It's still got all the pages. The plastic on the cover, like that gives it that nice shiny sheen, like that started to peel off. It's so old and so well used, but the book is still like perfectly legible. Like that book is a trooper. That and my original first edition of 2020.
Yep. I actually got the second edition of 2020, but that book is...
I've got like 5 copies of that fucking book.
Do you have
I originally wanted to get like 4 more copies, so when I ran games out of my game room and had the big table, I was going to put 1 copy of the core Cyberpunk book in each of the cubbies, but that didn't work out. The books got when 2077 was first announced, suddenly all the Cyberpunk books prices just skyrocketed.
And that was kind of ridiculous because Altar Storian still sold a good chunk of them as physical copies. Not all of them. It took them probably a year or two to get almost all of them back up to speed to be released.
Yeah, but it used to be before that you could find them on eBay at like discount prices.
Yeah.
Like get them for like $8 a piece for the core rule book. And then after the game was announced, they went up to like $40-$50 a piece for the core, and just like, what the hell are you people thinking?
Yeah, those who are collectors out there, just keep in mind, unless you are like the obsessed collector that needs to have something that was printed back in the 90s, you're going to pay through the nose for. If you're just looking for a hard copy of most of these books, you can get them directly from Altar Storian. I think the only...
I mean, my advice would be to just get them from Altar Storian. I've got first editions. Like I said, it's fallen apart. The first edition I had fell apart. The second one is doing okay.
Yeah.
I don't use it much because I've got PDFs now. Which thankfully lets me keep my books safe and secure for the most part. But yeah, my advice is just get it straight from the publisher, or if you don't want to do that, if you say you want it printed in a specific way, get it from ttrpg. Don't go to eBay and pay those prices. Don't give those people money.
Yeah, there's only 2 products that I think are from Altar Storian that you would have to spend the extra money. That is Land of the Free. I don't believe.
Yeah, you want the box set of that.
Yeah.
You want all the goodies that come with it, like business cards and...
Night City, I think, because the map isn't included.
Well, you can now get the map for free from the Altar Storian website and from their store on DriveThruRPG. You can just get it for free.
Yep.
I used to have it on my site before it was before Altar Storian released it. I didn't want to compete with them, so I'm pretty sure I took it down. But Yeah, it's out. The map is out there, and you can get it as a print on demand. Trying to find an original copy of Night City with the map, you talk about breaking your bank. That went for money even before the announcement.
Yep.
That was like one of the more sought after items. That and the miniature sets.
Yeah, and yeah, yeah, and again, me and Wisdom are definitely people who advocate Talsorian Store, buying from them, because you give
Absolutely.
them money, they will keep producing. So just keep on giving
Especially
them
if you
money.
show support for 2020. Right now, all their focus is on red, and I still hold out hopes that 2020 itself um, gets supported in some way, or another, even if it's just keeping those books alive.
Yep. Um, and if you're looking for any additional books, the 2020 was licensed by various companies. So a lot of those
Ionis,
companies, Ionis, and well,
DreamPod 9.
yeah,
I guess that
that's,
is Ionis. Uh,
and then the other one is
Crap. Atlas.
Atlas.
Atlas
Yes,
Games.
and Atlas is more
Atlas
doing.
put out the better stuff, in my opinion.
Yeah,
I liked what Ionis did, but Atlas was straightforward. Like, we're just putting out Cyberpunk 2020 stuff, and Ionis did a bunch of like weird genre mixing.
yeah. So for me, Ionis had interesting supplementary rules, specifically around cyber psychosis. The breaking down of that was I liked.
Dark Metropolis is a great. If you're going to buy something from Ionis, Dark Metropolis is what you want.
And Grimm's Dark Fairy Tale is also a good one.
Yeah,
And then they had a bunch of adventures similar to Atlas. So Atlas was strictly published adventures. Most of them you can still get through Drive Through RPG, both for Ionis, who is now DreamPod 9, and Atlas. You can't get them all. I don't know if they're just taking their time doing the scans to get them into PDF. But
hell, they
again,
might have lost the original files. You never know.
well, I still have my Green Wars if they want to come to my house and make copies of it, because I'm not going to let it out on my site or pay for
Yeah,
for
Green
me to
Wars.
take a trip to wherever their home office is and be guard on top of that thing, because that is one of the. And again, I don't know for our book reviews whether we'll go into all of the various sub books around that, because for our book reviews we're going to try to do it every other episode and do a breakdown of books, and give you guys our opinions and cool little features that we use and how we've used them, making them home rules as well.
We are slowly but surely making our way through the libraries, and there's people underestimate how many books were produced for Cyberpunk 2020 and its various offshoots. Because I'm still going to include Cyber Generation and V3, Cyberpunk Red, any of the stuff produced for 2077, the original 2013, the Ionis stuff, the tie-ins and crossovers like the Paranoia crossover, Alice Through the Mirror Shades. I mean, all this stuff people forget about.
Yep. So I think that's kind of it for our episode, or for this episode at least.
Yeah.
Um,
We have covered Wildside pretty thoroughly, I believe.
yep. Next episode we're still working on. We might have a special guest for that one. And if the special guest does come through, we're going to do an AMA of Interlock Unlimited.
Unlimited and all the goodies on your site.
Well, we'll see what happens. So it all depends on, arranging our guests and working it out. But those are a couple of the different shows that we're gonna have planned.
Yeah, no matter what, in the near future, there will be an Ask Me Anything about Interlock Unlimited. Hopefully, we can do it with the special guest in mind, but it's going to happen.
Yep.
So please think about any questions you might want to ask, any mysteries of Interlock Unlimited that you need unlocked for you.
Yep. And you can ping us on our sites, have our emails, so you can ping us through emails. Wisdom, he has various Facebook places he hangs out.
You can, Wisdom 000, and that's add Gmail to that at the end, and that's my email. You can find me, like you said, on Facebook, on Discord. Not much, but I'm there. Hit me an email if you didn't want to write that down. You can go to the site, Datafortress2020. That email is plastered all over the page. I look forward to hearing from you.
Yeah, and
ask me anything about anything, really, because I just like talking about Cyberpunk.
And again, you can reach me at Cybersmily at cybersmily.net. That email is also on my site, which is cybersmily.net. I'm also on Discord, various Discord servers, both Cyberpunk ones and actual gameplay. I visit those sites a lot. Don't really play in the games there, but just like to read what's going on in the community. Also, I am part of the two Reddit threads, which is Cyberpunk 2020 and Cyberpunk Red. So you can also catch me there as well. Just the Cybersmily. The misspelled version of Cybersmily. Just keep that in mind. Because there is no
the one
E
with the
in
E.
me. But yeah, and we'd like to thank our hosts, Rob Mulligan and Cyber Nation Uncensored.
Thanks,
Definitely
Rob.
give him some love. Check out his site at cybernationuncensored.com. He has this Twitch channel, which you're listening to now. He also has a YouTube channel where you can catch up on past episodes of ours as well as other shows. Capricious Nature, who is one of our big fans, who visits us all the time. He has actually quite a few games going on the Twitch.
He runs an amazingly awesome Nomad game. Check that out.
He also does a non-Cyberpunk, which is the Fallout game he does. And Rob also has a few games that he's running. One that I like is on Thursday night. I forget what the group's called, but it's pretty hilarious. You definitely want to check some of those live game sessions out. It's all good stuff. You definitely will get some inspiration into running your games if you do go and watch some of these. So I guess that's about it. So we'll catch you guys in 2 weeks. Have a great one.
Yep. Be safe, people. See you soon.